let's get into the review of the prelim finals. We'll start with Collingwood versus GWS. What a final it was. I guess a lot of people would have thought that this game was going to be quite close, including myself. Collingwood just don't seem to put teams away. And for a bit of it, Giants had the lead, and they looked like they were about to make the grand final this year, which would have been absolutely amazing that the top team all year, Collingwood, got eliminated by the Giants of all teams. Not to say they didn't deserve to make the grand final if they did beat Collingwood, but... yeah, I mean, the GWS have been a little bit off the pace for a lot of the year and really have just hit a hot vein of form towards the end, which is like cannon them into a nearly grand final berth. But at the end of the day, Collingwood did get over the line, led by players like Tagoe, Chris, Dacos had a good game as well. Sad to see McStay won't be playing in the grand final, but at the end of the day, it's obviously sad for him, and you got to feel sorry for the guy. But has he really been at the best of form? I think he's averaged a goal a game this year, and he only kicked 2 on the weekend, which arguably got them over the line. But at the end of the day, I don't think that he's a big loss. I think that Ash Johnson will come into the team and will definitely give an impact to Collingwood in the granny. Giants, you just got to commemorate them. You just got to give them a huge congratulations from where they were last year, 16th on the ladder. Didn't look like there was going to be much rosy side towards this season. Didn't bring many players in. But, the one player they did bring in was Toby Bedford. And what a season he has had as a recruit. Toby Green, as the new captain, has been massive. Been the best captain of the year. Adam Kingsley, arguably coach of the year, to get this club from where they were to where they are now. I don't know how they'll go next year, the Giants. But, you have to give them credit for where they've gone from... even earlier in the season. I think they were like 3-7, weren't they? Like 3-10, they made the finals and nearly 1 point away from a grand final. But at the end of the day, Collingwood held on. They got a little bit lucky in the end because Jordan De Goey was off that for 8 minutes, the last 8 minutes of the game, and they couldn't get him back on the ground. I think it was very lucky that their best player in the game not on for the last few minutes, and almost could have cost them. There are some chances that the Giants had late in that game to take it, but at the end of the day, the better team won, and I think it's great to see Collingwood in the grand final. I will get to the votes quickly. We had 3 votes going to Jordan De Goey. He was massive in this game. It will be interesting to see how he goes next weekend. I think if Collingwood can go on and win the grand final, that I think that he will be very far up there in the influence in the game and very well may go and win a Norm Smith medal. 2 votes went to Jack Crisp, was massive throughout the night, and going up against his former side next week will be a massive game for him. And the 1 vote I did give to Tom Green. I think Tom Green's been massive all year. I think when he went out those about a couple of weeks to a month with a hamstring, I believe it was, I think they did really lose a string to their midfield throughout that time. And it's just, he's been massive and arguably one of the best midfielders in the game at the moment. And I can't wait to see his career blossom in the next couple of years coming up. I think the Giants can definitely build in the next few years as well and potentially push that premiership, the inaugural premiership. I think they're definitely a different team from what they were in 2019 in those few years when they were pushing for a flag. I think this team is a lot more tougher. I think this team is built for a premiership. I don't think they're the fancy team that they once were. And I am really excited to see how the Giants go in the next few years. But all congratulations to Collingwood. And, you got to give... They are the favourites going into next week, being at the MCG, of course. They deserve the home final, obviously, being finishing top on the ladder. They've finally hit the form that I think they need to win a flag. And, massive win in the end. A couple of close wins in the finals, though. So they're going to have to, they can win it by 1 point in the grand final. I just hope that this grand final as well is close. I hope that it's not a blowout like the last few have been. And, it's a really entertaining grand final from the, top echelon of grand finals that we've seen. But, all great win from Collingwood. They dominated the first quarter and, just were able to... The Giants just... They couldn't get on the scoreboard against Collingwood, so I think that's going to be their issue. They need to find some avenues to goal. Maybe it's not with their forwards, maybe their midfield need to get involved. But at the end of the day, they couldn't put GWS away early. They didn't even score a goal, I think, until the second quarter, the Giants. So Collingwood really need to stand up early against Brisbane because Brisbane obviously have the best offense going into, basically the whole season, really, of how much they've been able to score in most games. And, I think... Collingwood were very good in this game at times, and they did very well for the last, I think it was about 15 minutes really, not to concede a score and hold a 1 point lead for, I think it was at least the last 10 minutes of the game. So Collingwood can hold up in defence. It's going to be a massive grand final, and Collingwood, congratulations to them on winning a very entertaining prelim final. One of the best finals we've seen in, well, I mean, I guess last year, Sydney versus Brisbane, Sydney versus Collingwood was a massive prelim as well. But now we'll talk about the Brisbane versus Carlton game. Now, I'm going to be a little bit more harsher on Carlton in this one than I were on the Giants, and I'll say it in a minute. I mean, Carlton had a massive start. They kicked the first 5 goals of this game, and it looked like Brisbane were going to choke once again. It looked like Brisbane, once again, this would be the 3rd time if they lost this one that they were going to choke in a prelim final. It looked like it was about time the Lions may have to rethink next season what they're going to be able to do with maybe coaches and all that sort of stuff. But this is a massive performance from the Lions to come back in the second quarter and then, dominate the rest of the game, in my opinion. I don't think Carlton are in it after quarter time. I guess Brisbane probably could have scored a little bit better. They kicked 11 goals, 13, so they may have to fix that up next week. Collingwood, the Lions have a lot of avenues to goal with Janaher. Hipwood even played pretty well. They've got Rayner. They've got some great performers up there. Lincoln McCarthy played well. Charlie Cameron, of course. So they've got a lot of those players. One player I do want to mention, though, is Kitty Coleman. I've mentioned him a few times this year. I think he got in the votes for the Boundary Riders medal throughout the year. I think he got a 3-vote game, actually. But this was his career best game. That in the second quarter, I think if you guys were watching the game, you would have remembered the kick that he made in the second quarter in the middle of the ground that went only about 3 meters off the ground and went about 60 meters that hit Joe Danaher straight on the chest. That really, to me, was like the catalyst to start pushing towards the lead and eventually winning the game, because his skills are amazing, and he was Brisbane's best by far, and he really was one of the catalysts to push them forward in that second quarter and get him right back into it. Coleman, I think a lot of clubs need to be looking at him if in the next couple of years if Brisbane aren't willing to pay him the cash that he deserves, because this guy is going to be one of the best halfbacks, if not wingmen, in the next 3 years if he can continue the form that he can show. I mean, this shows right now that he can be one of the best halfback wingmen in the comp with the foot skills that he has and the running power that he can produce. This guy's going to burst onto this. I mean, if he's not bursting onto the scene right now, if he can find a consistency, this guy's going to be one of the best halfback wingman roles in the next couple of years, in my opinion. Coleman was massive in this game. He obviously got the 3 votes. We'll get to the votes in a minute, but he did get the 3. He was massive. Brisbane in that second quarter, they just lifted in the midfield, and I think that's what they needed to do in this game. Carlton started off the midfield. They just dominated early. But then Brisbane's Lachie Neale, Josh Dunkley, Hugh McCluggage, Rayner went through there for a bit. Lincoln McCarthy even did for a bit. These guys went into the midfield. Chris Fagan got him to him a quarter time and said, come on, guys, we are better than this. We need to fucking perform here. He went straight out. They all went out there and said, we want to get to this grand final. And they did everything. Lachie Neale was massive in that after quarter time. Josh Dunkley was very good against Paddy Cripps. All of them really just stood up. But one I want to mention as well is Oscar McInerney in the ruck. He was massive in this game. Oscar McInerney, he may get a little bit questioned at times because he always gets it on the boot. He always just doesn't always use the handball, just to get his midfielders into space. And sometimes he just gets a little bit carried away with himself. But in this game, he held De Koning and Pettinet just away from the game. He was massive, Oscar McInerney. I think in the next couple of years as well, he can really stand up and become one of the best ruckmen in the comp, because he's very good around the ground. He's a good mark. He's very good with his tap work, and it also showed as well he can get on the scoreboard. He kicked 2 goals in this game, and a couple of really important ones as well. So Oscar McInerney, he did get the 2 votes in the end as well. So we've got 3 votes to Coleman, Kitty Coleman, 2 votes to Oscar McInerney. They were massive for Brisbane, and I think as well they were the catalyst to push them forward, which is good because this wasn't a Lachie Neale bursting performance. This wasn't Joe Danaher kicking 6 goals. This wasn't the star players of Brisbane. These were like, you could arguably call them their B grade, they're lower echelon players. But they stood up and they needed to. And that's what they're going to need to do next week if they're going to win a premiership, the Lions. They're going to have these players, everyone playing their role. And if these 2 and everyone else can, I believe the Lions can win the premiership. But yeah, those 2 were massive. Carlton, first quarter was really, really good. But this is why I'm going to be a little bit more harsh on Carlton, because this performance after quarter time was pretty dismal. They kicked 5 goals for the first quarter and did only kick 1 goal for the second and third quarter. Yes, they kick 3 goals in the end, get a decent score of 63. But this is something Carlton need to look at over the off-season. They need to find a way to get forward. This isn't so much recruiting, this is more game plan, because Carlton fell into the trap again. When they fall into trouble, they just bomb long to Curnow and Mackay, or Curnow for the majority of this game, because Mackay kind of played between the 50s. So Carlton need to find a game plan to find another avenue to goal, other than when they're 80, 70 out from goal, going inside their forward 50, bombing high and long, because Curnow, yes, he can take a contested mark, so can De Koning, but they're not going to do it every single time they bomb high and long. This is why a big reason why Carlton didn't win this game, because they didn't continue from quarter time. They had the pressure right up on Brisbane early, and that gave them the avenue to have that, quick ball movement on the rebound, that they could lower their eyes, go forward, and it wasn't a congested forward line for them, so they could hit up their forwards on the lead. So, or hit them from behind, This is the issues that Carlton have had for, the majority of the season. I mean, there's been times, when they got on that big win streak throughout the season, but when they were under pressure again early in the season, and in the first couple of finals, they kept on bombing high and long, and they were lucky that Melbourne and Sydney could not convert on their opportunities, because they very well could have been eliminated in the first round. But, I mean, I can't be all harsh on Carlton. I mean, they did very well to make the prelim to begin with. Beating Melbourne, sending them out in straight sets again, beating the Swans, who were in pretty good form. They did well to beat those two sides. And I think, to be honest, if I'm picking out of the Giants and Carlton, who had the harder draw, I think Carlton had the harder draw on their side to beat teams rather than the Giants. I think that the Giants... I mean, St Kilda were probably the team that everyone thought would like the fill-in team of the final series, and Port Adelaide were arguably the fill-in of the top 4. So I think that the Giants had an easier run. However, I think the Giants have a better game plan going forward, and Carlton need to seriously look at it, because their avenues to goal are very limited. And I also will say as well, I think Matt Owies getting dropped was a big mistake. I think that they needed Matt Owies in the team. He's always good for a goal a game, and he's very good with his defensive pressure, and I think that would have helped as well. But at the end of the day, like I mentioned, we gave Kitty Coleman the 3 votes, Oscar McInerney the 2 votes. And at this stage, I think this is pretty close that Sam Walsh will be winning the Gary Ayres medal. And he got the 1 vote here. I think this is a real push for a career-making final series. We saw Tom Hawkins way back in the day in I think it was 2009 or something. I can't remember. Maybe it was 2011. But Tom Hawkins had a massive final series, and I know they're different players, but that was really the catalyst to his finals. The making of his career. He always seemed like a fringe player for Geelong up forward, but then suddenly that final series when he just boomed onto the scene. This is something that Sam Walsh, I believe, is the time when he's going to boom onto the scene next season. I think he's a real player to watch. I think if anyone's betting out there, maybe chuck some money on Sam Walsh for early odds next year. Gamble responsibly, obviously. But, I think Sam Walsh could really, burst onto the scene next year. I think he's always been a very good midfielder, but this is what's going to make him a top A-grade player. The 2-way running that he's been doing in this final series for Carlton, it's not going to be that he's not going to be the right-hand man of Paddy Cripps anymore, and he shouldn't be. He has to be his own player. He has to be, joining with Carlton if they're going to, jump towards that next step and maybe win a premiership in the next couple of years. Sam Walsh has to be a very good midfielder and has to be one of the best to get Carlton right up there. And I think he's definitely ready to go next season. As long as he, has a good pre-season, can keep on going, I give him a huge ceiling going into 2024. He was very good in this game as well for Carlton, and I think he was their best player by far. But yeah, guys, that's basically the review of the prelim finals.